Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
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 How are you all doing?
Yeah, good as can be.
My electricity is on, so I'm happy in Lekwa.
I hope you didn't steal that electricity.
No, government can't steal. Don't you know that?
Hi, Nomazima. You're on mute.
Okay. Hi, Ashraf. How are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. It's my first time hosting a webinar.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
So be kind.
No, it's your discussion. You can manage it the way you want to.
Okay.
It's entirely your conversation.
Okay, no, I'll try. I'll try my best, guys. I'll try my best.
Good morning.
Good morning. Morning, Natasha.
Morning.
Where are you joining us from?
From Pretoria.
Okay. Lovely.
Very good morning to you, Natasha. Johann here.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this session. It's very interesting.
Hi, morning, Natasha. It's Nomazima here. How are you?
Good, and you?
I'm good. I just wanted to ask you, how do I pronounce your surname properly?
It's Supal.
Supal.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we're ready to go.
Okay. Good morning to everyone. Welcome to everyone tuning in on Teams, on Facebook, on YouTube, and those watching on LinkedIn via the YouTube platform. So welcome to the Mandela Bay Development Agency conversations looking at improving financial management in the public sector. My name is Nomazim Mankosi. I will be your facilitator today. So a bit about me. I'm a senior reporter for the Herald newspaper, focusing on reporting on the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality, focusing on the city's finances. I write about council, and I also report on audit outcomes from the Auditor General of South Africa. So today's webinar is focused on conducting a resolution-based conversation on how to improve financial management in the public sector. So, and the latest reports from the Auditor General of South Africa has revealed that out of the 257 municipalities in South Africa, only 27 got clean audit outcomes during the 2019-2020 financial year. The dismal outcomes obviously speak to the culture of mismanagement, lack of transparency, which inevitably has a negative effect on service delivery. This has also contributed to the 26 billion rand irregular expenditure incurred by municipalities. The Auditor General said that there's been a total deficit of 64.9 billion rand also incurred by public entities. But bringing it closer to home here in Nelson Mandela Bay, the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality is one of those municipalities that have been affected by receiving consecutive qualified audit outcomes. But obviously, it's not all doom and gloom. The Mandela Bay Development Agency, which is hosting this webinar, has been a shining example in the city of good governance, having received consecutive unqualified audit outcomes. Just a bit later on, the Mbda CEO, Ashraf Adam, will be welcoming guests today and possibly later on speak on how they've achieved such good audit outcomes. So just to do a bit of house cleaning, I just want to welcome everyone who is tuned in today via the Teams platform, via Facebook, via YouTube, and those again who are logged in via LinkedIn, the MBDA's LinkedIn, streaming in via YouTube. I also want to encourage guests to feel free to use the MBDA social media platforms, comment and give your thoughts and input into the conversations today. And also just a special welcome to PEFM. This webinar is being broadcast live there. So to all those listeners tuning in via PEFM, you're welcome. And the only way that you guys who are listening in via PEFM can contribute to the conversation happening today is via the Mbda social media platforms and possibly PEFM. And then another warm welcome to IFM. The same goes for you guys as well who are tuning in via there, that if you do want to contribute to today's conversation, to use the social media platforms. And then KQFM will be broadcasting the conversation sometime later on today. So a huge welcome. And then just to kick off today's session, we've got the Mbda CEO, Ashraf Adam, who will be welcoming everyone today. So just a bit about Ashraf Adam. He graduated from the University of Natal in 1998 with Masters in Town and Regional Planning. And since then, he has over 30 years experience spanning in the private and public sector. So I'm just going to check if he is in place, ready to welcome everyone. Good morning, Ashraf.
Good morning, Nomazima, and good morning to all our guests and everybody listening on the various platforms. This is the third of our webinar series. The first one was on mental health, and the second one, I just forget now, but this is the third of a series where we want to engage with the public and stakeholders around the work that we do and the challenges around the work that we do. Because everybody thinks that development work is easy. You just need to implement policies. You just need to go and build buildings and put in infrastructure. But when you work with communities, things are quite different and quite challenging. And in that respect, it also impacts on financial management because there are challenges that you have to go and engage with, such as employing local enterprises, employing people on the ground. And if you do that in a particular way, it is quite possible that you will undermine financial management. So we thought that the best way for people to understand the work of the Mbda is to talk about the actual work that we do and the challenges we face, and then to share that with the public. And so at the moment, for this seminar, we're actually putting ourselves out there in a manner of speaking, because the AG is currently at the Mbda undertaking the audit for 2020 and 2021.
Oh, yeah.
And so having this conversation is really putting ourselves out there, as I said. But I think it's important to have the conversation because a lot, as Nomazima said, when the AG reports, then we get particular reports of so many municipalities have got unqualified audits, so many have clean audits, so many have disclaimers, and so on and so forth. And I think it's useful to understand the work of the AG and the work of the AG in organizations such as municipalities, municipal agencies, and whatever other public sector bodies there are. And so in that regard, although, by the way, we've never had a clean audit. Our advert says clean audit. We've always had unqualified audits. There is a difference, and I'm sure Kuliswa and others will explain the difference. But from our point of view, we are we are on our way and working very hard towards a clean audit. But we've had a history of unqualified audits, and in that respect, we thought it's important to explain the work of the Auditor General to the public and engage with it. So we don't mind putting ourselves out there. And having mentioned the AG, we did invite the AG. Sadly, due to relatively commitments on their side and the notice given, they were unable to attend today. But I think there will be an opportunity because the AG did not say, no, we don't want to participate. They said, look, this is the reason we can't participate. And so in future, as the audit process unfolds, maybe for webinar number 4, we'll have the AG engaging with us on some of these things. So with that, let me hand over to you. And I'm looking forward to a wonderful conversation.
Hi, thank you, Ashraf. Thank you so much. As Ashraf mentioned, the someone from the AG's office was meant to be here today, but he's indicated what's happened. But for today's session, we've got 3 panelists. Mbda CFO, Kholiswa Mgijima. We've got Natasha Supau from the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. And we've got Johann Medler, Director of Johann Medler Pty Ltd, currently also serving as an administrator for Legua Municipality. So to kick things off for us, I will be calling on Kholiswa Mgijima to come forward. So just a brief bio on Kholiswa. As mentioned, she is the CFO of the Mbda, but before joining the Mbda, she was the Director for Municipal Financial Governance at the Eastern Cape Provincial Treasury, as well as the Director at the Gauteng Provincial Treasury. Prior to joining the 2 treasuries, Mgijima was a consultant for performance improvement under advisory division at PricewaterhouseCoopers in East London, where she gained experience in various consulting, assurance and assignments in both the public and private sectors of the Eastern Cape as well as local government. Kholiswa, you're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Nomazima, and thank you, CEO, for those opening remarks. I think from my side, colleagues, and welcome everybody, and good morning once again to everyone that is here today. I think from my side, as a way of opening remarks, I was hoping that AG was going to be here, but it's fine. I didn't want to dwell much on what AG has addressed in terms of the audit outcomes. I wanted to address this thing in a different way, because I think we all know what AG is all about in terms of what are they looking for. Norma, you've also already alluded in terms of where we are, what is out there, and people actually are reading the newspapers and the report is out there in terms of what areas of concerns AG has raised. But from the ABD's point of view, for me, what I wanted to probably share with everyone that is here today is to probably let us reflect on the core values. For me, I think that's very important. We seem to have shied away from that, and for the Mbda to be where it is right now, for me, I strongly believe those are the reasons why we have achieved unqualified audit with few emphasis of the matter. We keep on improving. And ultimately, where we want to be, we want to go back to where we were before in terms of receiving clean audit. We are working on that. So for me, those core values, I think that's what we are living according. One of them is the agility and resilience. Why I'm saying that, I think COVID-19 has actually taught us many lessons and challenges. Why I'm saying that, one area that we were hit that we were not expecting, it was a 12 million cut from the city. Remember, the MFMA is very clear in terms of budget. You needed to start your budget very early in the financial year, before the new financial year. We have already started that work, but unfortunately, COVID started. 12 million cut came in exactly, I think it was about 1 or 2 months before the new financial year. So we needed to act quickly. In terms of acting quickly, the question would be, what are we going to do, guys? Because cost-wise, the money is not there. We needed to shift. We needed to make decision quickly, and then probably work around what we are given by the city. So if you understand the Mbda, we are more reliant on what you are given by the city to implement their development projects. So that was one area that we needed to work very quickly. Cost containment measures we need to implement as soon as possible. All the non-essential items, if I were to put them, we needed to cut those, because one area also that came in very quickly was that staff were not going to be working at the Mbda. So IT had to quickly change as well. People were we had to flexibly work at home, and while still at home, work needed to happen. So for me, I still strongly believe where we are now in terms of Mbda agility and there's a resilience from the staff. It is the reason why we are where we are in terms of the audit opinion. And then over and above that, I think someone will ask, how do you explain that in an environment where public sector is very complex? One area, for instance, due to the unforeseen changes in the budget, That's what I'm trying to explain. We had to work around that. We had to also deliver in terms of what is expected from the community, including the operational management unit team within the Mbda. So that came in as a shock, but unfortunately, due to those two core values, everybody came in on board. We delivered at the end of the day. Over and above that, I would also like to believe that the flexibility of the staff, even the Mbda as a whole, actually made it possible for us to be where we are. By that, currently, from that COVID pandemic and the flexibility, we've got a new baby on board. We've got e-tendering system. Due to remote working, people could not be in the office, so the SCM staff came up with new ideas. Now, as we speak, there is e-tendering system that we are using, and it's working very well. And because of us, the agility, the flexibility, the resilience of the staff, we came up with that new baby, and we are still gonna use that. And the community, I'm sure now they already know how it works, and yeah, it's working very perfectly. Over and above that, let me not forget also a creativity. The creativity of the staff, I think with COVID-19, we had to make a decision very quickly. Things could not be done the way they were supposed to be done. The issue now on the ground was that psychosocial programs had to be there. We needed to assist the community. People on the operations team, the focus was more on that. We needed to also adjust the budget, make sure that the focus now is to change quickly. Psychosocial projects, we focus more on that. By that one example, I think we've seen on the newspapers I'll use one example of the Science Center, the collaboration that was done with one of the service provider and us actually producing the sanitizer and everything. Within the budget limit, the resources that we had, those kind of ideas came out from Mbda, came out from the team, from the Mbda. And then we managed also to work within the conditions because, remember, we could not do those things in the office. People were not in the office. We rely very much on the collaboration with other stakeholders outside there. And then, lastly but not least, over and above everything that I've already said, which I call them the core values of the Mbda, let us not forget, unfortunately, public sector is highly regulated. Someone might ask, in all these things that you have said, Koliswa, you know that the local government, the public sector is highly regulated. At the end of the day, everything that we have done in terms of those core values, we needed to actually comply with the law. Why I'm saying that, where we are in terms of what you already said, Nomazima, the irregular expenditure is there, but if you had to comply with the law, I think for me, I always believe, and where I come from, is that the MFMA is there not to be a stumbling block. But if you do everything with the law, you are safe. You will never be caught by your AG. If you say, AG, this is how I've done everything, but in terms of the MFMA, this is what it says. You will always be clean. You will always be in a good side of the law. So whenever people say local government is highly regulated, but I also believe it is the law that actually keeps us clean. If you want to be clean, if you want to sleep very consciously or without any worries at night, the law is there for you to actually protect you. So the irregular expenditures and everything else, if we were complying with the law, I think AG will find minimal findings in terms of those findings of irregular expenditure. And then lastly but not least, I think the integrity. I think one thing that I've normally admire with my CEO is the issue of, like, you cannot be a local government if you are not honest. One thing first, honestly does not start from the CFO. Like I normally say, financial management is not all about the CFO's office. It starts from everybody in the business. Let me use one example for that. For instance, if you were to procure in your area of work anything that you need to procure, it starts with you. You needed to make sure things first. Whatever that is procuring, it's actually within the right price before it even comes to the CFO to be paid. So that's honesty for me. So I cannot come at the end of the day and say, but so-and-so, how can you procure such a thing in such a high amount of price? For instance, for a lack of a better example, a loaf of bread cannot cost 20 rand, and you actually allow that to pass through the processes, and then it gets stopped by the CFO. So for me, integrity, in the public sector is a very important core value that we need to live by. We need to go back to that basic. And everything that is happening now, especially if I were to go back to the COVID-19, is because of that. People were not honest from scratch, and then the law unfortunately caught up with them. And then in terms of quality of the staff, I will leave that to my colleague, Ms. Supal. I think is more, I don't want to dwell much on it, but also not forgetting that the caliber of the staff at the Mbda make it possible for us to be where we are. It's not only the office of the CFO, it's everybody that is in the Mbda, each and every staff has made it possible. I think the controls, everything that we've implemented, the policies, the procedures, if they did not comply with them, it's not only a CFO, we will not be where we are in terms of us being where we are, improving the financial management of the Mbda, and then getting stronger and stronger until we reach the ultimate goal of an audit. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much, Mazima. That's it.
Thank you so much, Koliswa. We will be speaking to you later on in the conversation. I suppose I'll be asking you if you could tell us perhaps maybe what were some of those disclaimers or matters of emphasis highlighted by the AG in terms of the Mbda itself, and also I think basically Koliswa telling everyone watching and tuning in today, just simply follow supply chain management processes. Let the MFMA be your guide. And should you do that, then you would not consider the AG's office as a hindrance. So definitely, Koliswa, we will be chatting to you some more on what you've just told us. So for the program, we had about an hour and 30 minutes. I think now we've got an hour and 10 minutes to go. All my speakers are given about 10 minutes each to speak. And later on, there will be a Q&A session. So I do encourage everyone who is tuning in on our social media platforms, on Teams, to send through those questions and comments. If you've got any burning questions that you want to ask or you need clarities on, that you ask those. And hopefully, as Ashraf had said earlier, we would hope that people, when they leave the session, they know the difference between a clean audit, qualified audit, what matters of emphasis are, what irregular expenditure is, what fruitless, wasteful expenditure is, and that those do not necessarily always mean that people have looted or have stolen money. It could be just as Koliswa has had alluded earlier, that they simply had not followed the MFMA. So my next speaker is Ms. Natasha Supal. Natasha Supal is the Senior Executive at the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, looking at the public sector and enabling competencies. Natasha was previously a project director, public sector, and she's got over 15 years experience in financial environment of both public and the private sector. Before joining SAICA, Natasha was the CFO at a Schedule 3A public sector entity and an audit manager at the Auditor General of South Africa. Natasha, you are most welcome.
Thank you, Nomazima, and thank you to Mbda for having me on the session. Good morning to all the listeners joining in. I think for me, if I look at the public sector currently and where I come from, I've been both on the audit and on the financial reporting side, and it actually opened my eyes. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes. So it actually opened my eyes, because I think if you look at the lens from an auditor perspective and from a financial manager or a CFO perspective, it's very different. As much as we believe that things are easy to resolve, but practically these issues are not so easy in reality. And I think from that perspective, I'd just like to congratulate the Mbda on achieving the unqualified audit opinion. And I'm sure from what I can hear from the CFO, you are on track to achieving the clean audit. And yes, a subtle difference between, or a difference between the clean audit and the unqualified is clean audit, that there was no findings by the AG, there's no non-compliance issues. Whereas if you look at an unqualified audit opinion, the financial statements are free from material misstatements, so everything reported on the financial statements is fine, but probably the AG did find non-compliance at the entity. So that is just the subtle difference that I thought I would highlight. I think from where I'm coming and what I actually wanted to speak to, it was actually a number of things, and most of the things from what I can say, MBDA is currently being implemented, and it's actually good to see that. So the first one was on skills. And if you look at skills specifically, I think if you look at local government, we find it more of a challenge. We find that there's a lot of professionals that currently don't want to go into local government based on certain challenges or based on certain perception. And I think as a profession, we are trying to change that, to ensure that there are professionals that go in and assist the municipalities. And if you look at the skills, we normally focus on the skills at a finance division, but I think it's greater than that. We need to look at the other departments, because alone finance is not responsible for the audit outcomes. It's a collaboration between the whole institute. So heads of all of the divisions are also play a role in the submission of information to the CFO to prepare the financial statements. So if I look at that, we need to look at the skills from a finance division, and in the finance division, we have the CFO who should have the appropriate skills. We have the middle management, and then we have the clerks that's there. And I think normally what we find at municipalities specifically is that a lot of the officials at lower level either do not have a qualification and have been there for a long time. And for us, I think this is where the challenge sits, is that the CFO alone with the qualification is required to actually achieve the audit outcome of clean. And it's putting a lot of pressure. And if you don't have the right skills, then it actually becomes a challenge for the CFO. And the route that we're currently looking at is that we need to professionalize the whole finance division. And when we speak to professionalization, specifically in the public sector, we're speaking to individuals who do not have the qualification, but have the skills, they have the experience. So obviously there's an RPL that can take place. And these individuals can be mentored, they can go through specific processes. So whatever experience they have can be used as a recognition of prior learning and can contribute towards a minimum qualification. We're looking specifically at the importance of teaming up with professional bodies, and there are a number of professional bodies that is out there that can assist with this. And I think one of the things from that, once a person is affiliated with a professional body, it actually removes a lot of a burden from the entity or the municipality itself. The ethics is covered, disciplinary processes are covered, training is covered. So that individual then has some of the skills that are required to continue and to support the rest of the finance function. We also then look at the internal audit and do they have the appropriate skills? And I think that is the other area that we just need to focus on, is that in some instances we find there's an internal audit division, but they are not appropriately staffed with the correct skills, and then that becomes an issue. So I think skills is a major concern, and other things coming with skills apart from the technical side is we're looking at the soft skills. And I think from a psycho perspective, we look at it as an enabling competency, and it is as important as your technical skills. So if you look at an individual who's technically strong, but if they are unable to adapt, unable innovate, is not digitally wise, cannot communicate, and cannot have a good relationship with other divisions, it then also impacts. So as much as there needs to be a technical skills of individuals, there also needs to be a balance of the enabling competencies or the soft skills to actually allow the individual to perform. So that was from a skills perspective, and I thought if I look at the AG's report further, the other areas that we actually need to focus on is the governance. So we look at council. Is council asking the right question? Is council educated to ask those questions? How can we educate them further? What workshops can we do? And by asking the right questions, they're able to get the answers, and they're able to implement the right controls or the right processes going forward to improve audit outcomes. We also look at audit committees. And if I look at some of the audit committees, we have members who are appointed there probably by council or probably in entities by the board. And some of these audit committee members do not have the minimum qualification as well. And that becomes an issue, because how do you provide oversight if you are unable to ask the right questions based on the information that is given to you? And the governance structures therefore play a critical role from that perspective. You need to enforce accountability to the officials within the entity, and you need to provide leadership. So these individuals also have to have the right skills, have to be educated, and I'm saying that you don't need to always have all financial people with degrees and stuff. But if you don't have that, you need to somehow find a way to educate those that are there so that they can actually do their jobs and make a difference. And it's not just a tick box exercise to just have an audit committee, because MFMA or PFMA requires an audit committee, but an audit committee that is actually providing value to the municipality. I'm not going to touch too much into some of the other things, because it's a lot. It's the whole thing about consequence management and accountability. And I think when we talk to this, it actually comes from the culture within the organization. It's an integrated approach across the organization. How is leadership? How are officials doing? Is there openness and communication across the municipality? And it needs to be taken that the CFO alone is not responsible for the financial statements, but it's a collective effort across the organization. And then, so when the MFMA audit outcomes actually came out and we analyzed it, there were specific things that we actually focused and highlighted, because a lot of them also dealt with our members who work in the public sector as consultants, and it becomes an issue where consultancy fees are high and the consultant is not adding any value. We found that there were disclaimers in some of the entities, there was qualifications, there was adverse opinions in instances where a qualified professional has helped the organization in preparing financial statements. So these were some of the questions. There has to be something wrong. There's a root cause. There's either something that is not being implemented throughout the year and is not working, and we call consultants in. And that then speaks to your internal controls. How important are your internal controls? Are you monitoring it? Are you implementing it? And if it's not working, are you revising it? So these are some of the questions that needs to be asked. I think just on my side, from a conclusion, there was an article that basically went out as well, is that something needs to be done now. We need to somehow try and resolve what is the current status quo within local government as well as national and public, regional, provincial government. And the reason is because if we continue the way it is, if we continue with non-maintenance of roads or non-maintenance of infrastructure, it actually leads to a longer-term effect on the economy. It leads to a longer-term effect on the citizens. it has a ripple effect. So we need to start doing something now. We need to start holding people accountable, and that can only be done through consequence management and a change in culture. And I think, yeah, so that was just my take for the discussion for today. But I think we can open a lot of these things up later on in the discussions through the questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Natasha, for your input. Speaking there about strong internal controls, consequence management, and also speaking on the importance of employing skilled people and collaboration between departments, and not just relying on the CFO to make sure everything is good. And then PEFM is live, so people can tune in there, go to PEFM, listen in, and if you do want to make comments, again, use our social media platforms. So the next speaker we've got is Johann Medler. So Johann Medler is a self-motivated administrator, leader, and an expert in the local sphere of government. He has amassed a wealth of experience, competencies, and expertise in the sector since 1995. And as mentioned earlier, he is the current administrator in Lekwa municipality. He is the former municipal manager of the Nelson Mandela Bay. Since he left, we have still not appointed one yet. Welcome, Johann.
Very good morning to you, Nomazima, and also to my fellow panelists, also to the CEO, Mr. Adam, and then to all of the listeners and the viewers. It is in fact very opportune, for us to discuss this matter of improving financial management. I do think that the previous points that were made by the panelists are absolutely valid. The AG's report is an absolute horror show if you care anything about governance and government. So we have to start talking about these things, not in a sugar-coated manner, but in a way that we understand what exactly the issues are. Now, of course, I come from a management perspective. As indicated, I've been an accounting officer in a few municipalities. So I've tasted rather the sweet fruits of a clean audit, but also the absolute bitter pill of unqualified audit, of qualified audit. And then where I am now at Lekwa has been disclaimed for the past 5 years at least. A disclaimer, for those who don't know, is when you simply have no records to show what you are putting up to the AG. So the AG can't go and look whether at your records, whether your financials are correct, because your records are in a mess. So they say, we disclaim this, we walk away from this. It is bad. So I've tasted all around, and I think I'm going to taste a better one for purposes of where I'm currently at. But there are a few reflections that I would like to share with you with regard to financial management and improving it. I'm on record as saying that, sometimes we must just do our jobs. Maybe if we do our jobs, things will be better. It is in legislation that you must appoint competent people, experienced people, skilled people, people with education. It's there. But we don't do it. Or it doesn't happen. It is in legislation, in the financial framework legislation, that what the role is of the executive mayor or of the mayor, what's the role of the accounting officer, what's the role of the other senior managers, what's the role of the MPAC. It's all there, but we are not doing it. That is why we are in a position where we are. So sometimes we have to just sit back and say, okay, no more new stuff. Just go back to the basics now. Just go and read the stuff. And I think I want to spend some time on that whilst also reflecting on some of my experiences. And I won't take long, Mazima, I promise you. But it's important, that one have a look at the MFMA, Chapter 7, Chapter 8 of the MFMA for the students who are tuned in. There it sets out very clearly in Chapter 7 what's the role of the mayor. What is the mayor supposed to do when it comes to financial management? And it's straightforward. The mayor must ensure that the law is complied. That is his or her job. Ensure things get done. And if things are not done, you must say so. In council, you must inform those that must be informed. So you are the custodian of the system. Our mayor is doing that. Read the AG's report. The AG's report is clear. I'm not going to say. You can read it. But there's another chapter, just the following one, Chapter 8. Chapter 8 talks to the administration, the accounting officer, talks to the senior managers, and it says what their job is. And in that chapter 8, 61, section 61, if I'm not mistaken, there's a unique provision relating to accounting officers, and Ashraf will know this. Ashraf is also known as the CEO. So Ashraf will know this. And that is that as an accounting officer, you must act with fidelity. In other words, good faith. You must act with honesty. You must act with integrity. And you must act in the best interest of the municipality. Now imagine we do that as accounting officers. Just imagine. Then it goes on, and I'll come back to that. Then it goes on to the others, to the other senior managers, and it says that they must comply with the law to the best of their ability when they exercise their powers and their functions. It says so. And that also spells out what those powers and functions are. So my point is here, leadership. The executive mayor has to lead in those areas that the law says that it must ensure things happen. He or she must lead. And if you lead, you are seen to be leading. You are setting the pace. You are setting the bar. That's what you do. As an accounting officer, you must act. The law says you mustn't ensure, you mustn't take care that it happens. You must act with integrity. Now, in order to do that, it means that you must lead, as far as that is concerned. When people look up to you, when people look at you, they see, now there is good faith. Now there is integrity. Now there is somebody that by his or her actions act in the best interest of the municipality. And that is leadership. So you set the tone at the top. Both the mayor and the accounting officer, they set the tone. And Nomazima, when the tone is not set, you've lived in your metro for quite some time. So if the tone is not set at the top, there is chaos that ensues. And you can look across the board, you can look at the AG's report. The AG's report, in fact, has a section dealing with leadership and governance, and you must just read it. For any municipality, it's right there. They actually reflect on that. So it's a very important component of financial management, And if financial management is bad, then when one acts in that kind of a way, in a leadership way, then it will improve financial management. But that's only one aspect. Also, you would need clear lines of accountability. And people always think that it's not clear. It's very clear. Let me be very clear with everybody on this. It is very, very clear. The MFMA Systems Act is clear. There's no argument. But people make up these arguments when they sit in big meetings and wanting to be clever. So there are clear lines of accountability, and those clear lines of accountability is critical. If you would want to run a municipality or any institution for that matter successfully, and if you want to either improve financial management or if you want to maintain excellence in financial management, there has to be clear lines of accountability. You must know who calls the shots, and there must not be a competition. A previous mayor that I served with made this analogy, and he said that a municipality is a train, and this train runs on two tracks. One is the politics, and the one is the administration, and there are slits between those. Those slits ensure that those two lines run parallel, very importantly, parallel. And when those lines either converge or they diverge, there's going to be a derailment. And the AG's report tells us of all the derailments in local government. So the lines of accountability must be clear, and it must be maintained, and sometimes uncompromisingly so. And trust me, I speak from experience when I say uncompromisingly so. You stand for it, end of story. I'm looking at the time. Low, I made a note here, a low pain threshold for mediocrity. Now, that's where I am. In my career, you simply cannot tolerate mediocrity. If you tolerate mediocrity, it means you yourself are mediocre. Nothing above 50%. Keep your head below the radar and hope they don't find out that you haven't performed. That's mediocrity. And I think mediocrity is something that has now found its footing in especially government, but I would suggest in most aspects of our lives. And it is being tolerated, and we are not calling it out. We are sugarcoating it. We are saying we need resources, we need this, we need that. But sometimes people are just mediocre. The results of the performance, mediocre. We think 60% is great. It wasn't so bad as last year. Last year it was 52%. Mediocrity cannot be tolerated, because if we do, our financial management will go to pot. We all know that. We have to be uncompromising about excellence. We have to be uncompromising about integrity. We have to be uncompromising, as one of the previous panelists said, about compliance. You must be uncompromising. Often people say I have to deviate MM, CM, CEO. We must deviate here because it is an emergency. And when you go and investigate that so-called emergency, you will see it's a self-made emergency. You caused this emergency. And that is why you now do not want to comply. So one demands excellence. And you demand excellence by saying, I want to see your plan. Where's your procurement plan? If the plan isn't there, it means that you, at one stage or the other, you're going to come to me with this excuse. And that cannot happen. So financial management, good financial management, or improving it, also has its basis in proper planning. You must plan to spend. You must plan to procure. Everything needs to be planned so that things are predictable and so that you can hold people accountable. So if something does not happen at the particular time, you come and you call that person out in a management meeting and says, your plan says that the specification should have been done. Now you're giving me all kinds of stories. And sometimes you have to convince people to travel. Go and see the world. But not here, not in this municipality. And then, lastly, from a managerial perspective, we have to talk about merit appointments. Every time when there is a mess in local government, you find our senior political leaders say, it is time to start appointing people with merit. Now, as I told you, Nomazima, we've been having it since 2000 in the systems that we've been having it. Haven't been doing it though. So 21 years later, we want to get clever and say, MMs must be competent. It is because we allow other considerations to trump when we make certain appointments, especially at senior level. I don't want to exclude the political executive, because I do think that you also need excellence within the political executive, because it certainly helps. But moreover, at technical level or at the administrative level, across the board, you need meritorious appointments, because without that, it is very difficult to manage a system that is accountable and where you can actually implement what people call consequence management. That is when people do not perform as expected, they are negligent or grossly negligent, and then there should be consequences. But if everybody knows that nobody has been appointed on merit, nobody is going to act against anybody, because then you will expose us all. So we need to call that out, that we have not been doing it. We were supposed to do it, and we haven't. So we have to look, those that make those decisions to appoint must look at themselves first and say, maybe I shouldn't be in this position where I make this decision, because I've already shown that I am not capable of making a meritorious appointment. So all of those things, colleagues, panelists, Nomazima, all of those things, in my experience, contribute to good financial management, or if it was bad, if you implement that, to improving financial management. Or if you have good financial management and you comply with those, excellence will follow. So I hope to engage with you further on that basis. Thank you, Nomazima.
Hi, thank you, Johann. Thank you so much for that input. Just taking a bite out of what you said, I think appointments are based on merit. I think in line with what Natasha had said and Koliswa had said, procurement in line with the MFMA, and then also just on what you've said, maintaining those clear lines between the administration and the political side of it. Thank you very much to the panelists who've spoken today. Basically, what can be done to improve financial management in the public sector. So in terms of the discussion, I'm just going to throw questions and just ask you, since you were the last speaker and are fresh on my mind, I will just ask you, what do you think are the specific issues that dog local administrators and keep them in a perpetual cycle? I think earlier you were also speaking on consequence management. We've seen this being flagged by the AG several times, saying there is no consequence management in municipalities, that municipalities do not work on improving the disclaimers and findings by the AG, and that you keep on having repeated findings, as in the case of Nelson Mandela Bay. Like I said earlier when I started, that they've had about 8 consecutive qualified audit outcomes. So I would ask you, what do you think are the issues that dog local administrators and keep them in these perpetual cycles?
Yes. There are a host of factors that the system. I think first up, I would say, is when these irregular, let's make the example of irregular expenditure. So when irregular expenditure is incurred, now remember, it is the job of the senior managers and the MM to prevent irregular expenditure. And irregular expenditure, for those who don't know, is when you haven't followed all of the rules. Typically supply chain, typically, but it can be others. You haven't followed all the rules and you've made the expenditure, and the AG comes and says, you haven't followed those rules, therefore this is irregular. So it's not whether one is good or bad, but you haven't followed the rules. But I can promise you 90% out of 100, there are bad consequences. Anyway, that irregular expenditure is supposed to be picked up in the system, what we call the first line of defense. So the first line of defense are those managers that actually manage the budgets. It is normally incurred at that level when somebody deviates, but they don't follow all the rules. As an example, they deviate from the established policy procedure, but it is not picked up because somebody is not doing his job. Somebody is saying, no, but this is not an emergency, for example. That then goes through the system, and at the level of the CFO, it must be picked up that this is irregular. But they are saying, no, it's not irregular because we also think it is an emergency. Now, the MM should pick it up and say, no, I think this is a problem and I want to refer it. Sometimes it happens, often it doesn't happen. So now it comes to the AG and the AG picks it up. So what is supposed to happen is that if you had decent appointments, they would have said this expenditure that was now incurred because somebody could incur it at the lower level. There's a report that must go to the Municipal Public Accounts Committee, the MPAC. You know, I think you attend those MPAC sometimes. It must go there, and in that report, it will say, this is what happened, this is what went wrong, and these are the people that are responsible, and this is what we think should happen to them. They must either be disciplined, or they must be warned, or something must happen, or they must pay back. It all depends how serious the thing is. And that doesn't happen. So all of those things don't happen. Where you should have that report, it's called the Section 32 report, Section 32 of the MFMA. It doesn't happen. For all of those reasons, and now you sit, and now you multiply that by hundreds of instances, and you find yourself a material irregularity, and then you have problems. So I do think that when people are employed that either don't do their work, or they know what they must do their work, but because there is another motive for not picking up this, because it will expose somebody who gave an instruction, you know, somebody crossed the lines, they were supposed to be on this line, but now they find themselves on the other line. They want to protect somebody, then it's a problem. The case in point is the now suspended, I think the fired DG of Durko, you know, with 118 million rand purchase of a New York property that didn't exist. And his excuse was, you know, I wanted the minister's view to prevail. Big mistake. Big mistake. The accounting officer in a case like that must pick up the tab for that, and he is doing that now. And that is a lesson, I think, to all managers, that you do your work and you stick to the law, you stick to the prescripts, you stick to the policy, because if things go wrong in a proper system, the buck will come and it will park itself in your office, and you will have to deal with the buck. So those things, Nomazima, don't happen. They don't happen. If they happen, it's the exception. Just look at, for example, the few court cases that there are in municipalities against staff. I think Nelson Mandela Bay, simply because of the IPTS, They probably have the most cases registered against staff members and sometimes politicians and service providers. But that should be the nature of the game. That should be normal. That we act in the best interest of the municipality. I have to get that money back. It's a lot of money that went down the drain, and then you go after those perpetrators. And I'm speaking about Nelson Mandela Bay as an example. So unless we break that cycle, that link between the appointment and you owe me, if we don't break that, and if we don't bring in merit, we will sit with this problem for a long time. Nomazima?
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to throw it to Natasha, and just ask you, just in terms of what programs are there to support professionals in the public sector, and then also ask you what is the data showing in terms of the percentage of highly capable accountants making their way into the public sector? Are we seeing these qualified individuals coming into the public sector?
Thank you, Nomazima. I think so. This is something that we're driving, and I think as a profession throughout all accounting bodies, it's actually a challenge currently. So if we look at, and I wouldn't want to just focus currently on psycho qualification because it's open to every I wouldn't want there's other professional bodies, SAIPA. So as SAICA, we have 3 tiers in our designation. One is the CA, and that's your upper management. So it's normally a CFO, your finance manager. Then we have a mid-tier, which is an AGA, an associate general accountant. And they are also CFO. So we do find that many of our members in the mid-tier are at municipalities and are at either finance manager or a CFO level. And then we have the accounting technicians. And the accounting technicians predominantly are for your clerks that are there. And the focus is specifically on local government. We do have a qualification that focuses on local government. And as SAICA, or as I said, we are driving the professionalization of the public sector, both in local and national government. And we feel that it's key. There is currently a task force that has been implemented as well. And we are part of the ministerial task team, which is looking at professionalization of the public service. Having said that, although it's looking at public service, and when they looked at public service, it looked more at your national and provincial government. The idea going forward is that it flows through to local government as well. So there is a professionalization of the public service framework that should be released shortly. And there's a whole host of things that they're looking at. I think coming back to your data showing the movement of professionals into the public sector, it's actually a big concern from our side, and that's where we are trying to drive this, is to say that because the concerns that come through from our members specifically is that normally when they go into public sector, they are seen less, and it's difficult to move out if they do need. And a lot of them are not wanting to go because of the media that's out there, where there's intimidation threats, there's ethical challenges that exist. So a lot of the members are actually having a challenge from that perspective as well. And we are trying to address this to provide guidance, to promote the importance of the public sector and of the greater need in the country to improve financial management and the difference that they are making once they go into the public sector. I think if we go lower down to university level, to school level, there's also a need there to change the narrative, because if you look at university level, public sector is currently not taught. It's not taught in any of the modules, and it's currently changed slightly where they've included some focus on public sector. So what we pick up is that once an individual qualifies, what happens is they have all of the private sector knowledge. They have knowledge of your Companies Act, of IFRS, but very little knowledge of standards of GRAP, of MFMA, PFMA. And I think that's where we're also trying to change the narrative, is to say that all individuals going through university need to start understanding that there is a difference in the public sector, so that once they go into the public sector, they already have the knowledge that MFMA exists, that there is different standards of accounting that exists as well. And it actually makes it easier for these individuals then to move into the public sector. So I think from our side, there's a big drive, and to support government in this is to try and get professionals in, try to change the narrative, try to make the public sector a place, one of the best placed for employment or for individuals to consider. But currently it is a concern because we find that there's a fewer and fewer people wanting to go into the space.
Natasha, are you just able to perhaps give us a percentage of how many make it into the public sector, those graduated?
Unfortunately, I don't have that percentage currently. I think if we look specifically from our side, majority of the individuals that currently go into the public sector, and we look at it from a trainee perspective, the AP is currently the biggest employer of graduates as trainees, and generally those trainees actually then either end up going into public sector. So currently, sorry, I don't have that with me. Thanks.
Okay, no, that's fine. And then I just wanted to ask you, are there elements in the PMFMA and the MFMA that make them disablers for service delivery? Because we always hear officials blaming supply chain management processes. It's taking too long. We're unable to move forward with projects because of just these delays. Are they disablers for service delivery, would you say?
Okay, so if I look at it, a lot of these things, so if you look at the PFMA, MFMA, it allows for emergencies to take place, and that goes through a deviation process. I would go back to saying, has proper planning taken place during the year? If there's things that we could have foreseen, there would have been proper planning, and those processes would have been followed. I think the reason that those processes are in place is for a reason, and it's to prevent wrongdoing or misuse of the public funds. So for me, it's not a disabler. If I can say, if proper planning did take place, you would find there's instances where there would be an emergency that has taken place, and the prescripts actually allows for that. It allows the accounting officer to approve those prescripts, and that doesn't make it irregular, but it needs to be an emergency. It needs to be something that you couldn't foresee, that you couldn't have planned for. On an annual basis, all entities should have planned for procurement and gone through that process so that they are able to manage the compliance side. So personally, I would say that the legislation is there for a purpose, and it's to actually avoid. So if there hasn't been proper planning, that excuse of it being a disabler can become an issue.
Thank you so much. Ms. Kholiso, I'm moving over to you, and I would ask you the same question as I'd asked Natasha on the PMFMA and the MFMA.
Thanks, Nobazima, once again. I'll also like to agree with my previous speaker. like I've already alluded in my opening remarks, the law is there for a reason. And Mr. Medler also, I think, highlighted the most important thing. If there's no planning in place that is done adequately, which is timelessly, then definitely people will come in and take chances to say, I want this as a matter of urgency, then please do it. So for me, again, let me say, despite being put under pressure when it comes to supply chain management, follow the law, and then it will never go wrong. So MFMA is there for a reason, and then once you don't follow the law, then definitely issues of irregular expenditure will actually emanate, and yeah. That's my take on that. Thanks, Namazin.
Okay, thank you. And then just to take it back, Koliswa, to when you were speaking earlier on, you just spoke about the impact, basically delays in the Mbda receiving funding had on your operations. I would just ask, even though the Mbda has at times been delayed in receiving the funding it gets from the municipality, how has that impacted you? Has it had a negative effect on your operations, even though at the end of the financial year you guys did receive an unqualified audit outcome? And then also how, even though you have these obstacles in your way, how have you managed to continue on this good streak? And can you just also highlight some of the disclaimers that the Mbda received and what you guys are doing on improving those and working towards that clean outcome?
Okay, maybe on the negative impact of us receiving the claims from the city, one area that we've managed to do, I think, to put it in for a lack of a better word, is juggling the cash. Remember, we had to be strict, very strict in terms of the cash. Items whereby people can do away with, then we just tell them, no, guys, it's essential, is there a need? Then we just say, okay, especially now with the COVID pandemic, we could not do things the way we used to do them. So all the non-essential items that were not affecting business continuity, we had to pack those. For instance, I'll use one example. Issues of decoration in the office. There was no need for that. So for us was to say, let's also review our contracts and then probably see where can we save cash in terms of what we are facing currently. And then over and above that, I think you've also asked us in terms of where we are, what were the areas that were raised by your AG. It was actually the emphasis of the matters, like Ms. Sopel has already indicated, in terms of all our financial, despite the challenges that we faced, all the stuff that we've incurred in terms of expenditure, we could actually account for through the, strict internal controls, like I've already mentioned. But those were two emphases of the matters that AG felt we needed to improve on those. One area was that EVAT, the calculation that was done between us and the AG. We had issues there, we had differences. So that was the area that we were not happy with, which we had to manage and monitor on a monthly basis. And then with the internal audit on the ground also, they've already looked at that and they did not see any issues in preparation for the upcoming audit. And then another animal on that was raised during the previous audit was the issue of us giving points to locality. I think that was another animal that we did not expect, and probably it will come with other municipalities across the board. We are still consulting with National Treasury because issues like Mbda is actually here for that. We are here to give work or probably uplift the local businesses. So for us not to give points to those people so that they can get work within the PE, then that was an issue. That was another issue, but currently we've decided let us not put it in until such time National Treasury comes into the part and give us a direction. So those are the main, only two emphasis of the matters issues that we raise. And yeah, that's all for me. Thanks, Mazima.
Okay, thank you so much, Koliswa. If anyone wants to engage on the Teams network, please feel free to put up your hand and ask questions, you are more than welcome. Please feel free. And then I wanted to put this question. I think maybe Mr. Medler, you can answer it best, because we keep talking about the PFMA and the MFMA. Can you just, in simple English, tell our viewers just what are those and how do they differ?
Okay, thank you, Nomazima. I will answer that, but I would also like to comment firstly just on the issues that you have raised on the inhibitors and so on. I broadly agree with my fellow panelists. That the law is there to be obeyed and followed, and is there for a reason. But there are, however, aspects that can be refined. I'll give you one example. Currently, the limit for going out on an open public tender, in other words, that you must advertise, is 200,000 rand. Now, that 200,000 rand has been in place since 2003. So that is 18 years ago. So 18 years ago, 200,000 rand was a lot of money. 200,000 rand now is next to nothing. But still, there would be, and this inevitable period that you must engage in terms of public tendering processes. Now, it is true that if you plan early enough, you can do it, but it's unnecessary. So the refinement would certainly be, that the legislator goes back and look at those figures and say, listen, now what used to be 200,000 rand is now 10 million rand, and anything above, for example, that amount of money, that must be an open public tender, and prior to that, under that, there can be a process of quotes that you must get from approved service providers and so on. There can also be a distinction drawn between certain classes of municipalities. In other words, a system of differentiation where you can say the metros can go the 10 million route as I indicated. So that would be one aspect. Another aspect would be where currently it's very difficult to enter into public-private partnerships. It literally takes you 2 to 3 years in order to go through that particular process. Now the reason for it is sound and so on, but it makes it unpalatable for council to make such a decision, because it's just too long, and yet there are very good reasons for going into these partnerships. For example, for landfills and so on, we are running out of space and so on. So there are very good reasons why I think there needs to be a refinement, but I won't call them an inhibitor. So that's just my comment on that. The MFMA is short for the Municipal Finance Management Act. So the PFMA is for the Public Finance Management Act. And in this case, public means the province and the national. So we have 3 spheres of government. For the province and the national, there is the Public Finance Management Act, and the MFMA, Municipal Finance Management Act, came later, and it deals only with the management of municipal finances. So there are some similarities, but there are also big minimal additions that have been made to the MFMA that you won't find in the PFMA. And I know that there are moves afoot to bring them more in line. In other words, to bring the PFMA more in line with the MFMA. There are many rules and provisions that we need to follow. In the MFMA, that's not there in the PFMA. I'm not going to go through the whole list of it, but I think for purposes of this discussion, they simply relate to financial management, one in the municipalities and the others in the other 2 spheres of government.
Okay. And then just also for the benefit of our viewers, can you just also unpack concepts such as fruitless, irregular, and wasteful expenditure? Because as I said, I think in the beginning of the session that I think there's this notion that when you mention either of these, it's people assume that money's been stolen. So can you just tell our viewers and unpack it for them, please?
Okay. Well, I'll do so by means of examples. They are defined just for the students. They are defined in the MFMA. So if you look at the first part and the definitions, you'll find it. I've already explained what irregular expenditure was. That's where you don't follow the rules. Right? So there's some block that you didn't tick, and you've incurred the expenditure, and as a result of that, non-compliance, that you did not follow a particular process, or there was no tax clearance certificate, for example. That's a classic one. You appoint somebody, there's no tax clearance certificate, all the expenditure is irregular. That's an example of that. Then when it comes to fruitless and wasteful, normally go hand in hand. And there the logic is that if you have really thought about this expenditure that you incurred, if you were reasonable about why you need to expend it, you would not have expended this money. It was fruitless. It didn't add anything. And because it was fruitless, it's now wasteful. And now the wasteful, as soon as you say something is wasteful, it means that must be now recovered. Firstly, you must say so to the AG, I've incurred fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I did not know that there was already a contract dealing with exactly this same matter. We entered into another contract for exactly the same matter. Therefore, the second one was fruitless and wasteful. It goes through the process, and then the municipality must recover that money from whoever incurred that fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Other than with irregular expenditure, the impact can say, okay, we acknowledge that you didn't tick the box. It probably was a mistake because of the reason that you give, and we can now regularize it. But you must still declare it. You must still say it is irregular, because it will always remain irregular. It's just the consequences that may be different. So with fruitless and wasteful, you must recover it. Then there's also this thing called unauthorized expenditure. Heaven forbid, unauthorized. You should never. Where does that even come from? It was not budgeted for. So something is not budgeted for example, it is unauthorized. In other words, all expenditure must be authorized via a budget. That's why it's only a council that can make a budget in local government. You incur the expenditure, there is no vote for it, but it was incurred, and now you have to go and grab money from somewhere else and create this vote. No, you can't do that. That is unauthorized. That must also be declared, and unauthorized can also be recovered from those who have incurred it. That is broadly the difference between those kind of expenditures. Maybe Ms. Supal can correct me where I erred. Nomazima?
Natasha, I think I'll bring it to you. What do you think it will take to reverse these trends that we're seeing, in terms of these three irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, and also the audit outcomes, the repeated findings, the non-compliance? What do you think it will take for us to reverse these trends, or at least just bring up the number of unqualified audit outcomes?
Thank you. And I think just to go back to Mr. Medler, I completely agree. So there was nothing that I was going to change in his response. I just wanted to add one more thing before I just take your answer your question, is that if we look at irregular expenditure, specifically its non-compliance with the procurement legislation. But in addition to that, it doesn't mean that the services was not received by the municipality. So I could have probably went out and tendered, for example, purchasing PPE during COVID, and I would have received that PPE, but it was irregular, and that irregular could have been something like no tax clearance, which is an essential part of the procurement process, that we do not receive a tax clearance, and hence it becomes irregular expenditure. However, that service was delivered to me. So I think there is sometimes a misconception where we identify irregular expenditure and the citizens believe that irregular expenditure means that the services wasn't rendered. It actually means that the services may have been rendered, but the procurement process was not correctly followed, and there was a material non-compliance from that perspective. So I think I just wanted to add that on. I think when I come back to what you speak to about how do we correct the irregular, fruitless, and unauthorized, as well as an improvement in the audit outcomes, it's a very difficult question because there's many different answers to it. But for me, I think, and what the AG always indicates, there's a lack of accountability, a lack of consequence management. And Mr. Medler actually went back and said that once fruitless and wasteful expenditure has been incurred, it's up to the accounting officer to investigate, identify the person who has done the wrongdoing. If it's an employee, try and recover that fruitless and wasteful from the employee, and obviously go through the whole disciplinary process. So currently that doesn't take place. And I think that's the culture. So if I get away with something once, most likely I will continue doing it because I'm not being held accountable, and that culture has to change. If I had allowed for procurement in terms of non-compliance with irregular expenditure, I need to be meticulous in how I conduct myself and ensure that all of the supporting documents to comply with the prescripts is there. So I would take more time to ensure that I receive everything and I do comply. However, if I, as an individual, went through the process, forgot about a tax clearance and got away with it, no disciplinary processes taken place, I was not held accountable by anyone, obviously that's the culture that will exist within the organization, and it will continue because there's no disciplinary action. So consequence management and accountability becomes very, very important. And I think it then talks to the whole culture, because if that culture is not accepted within an organization, it will change the mindsets of individuals there. It's actually a big concern currently because if we look, and I think the viewers would know that the AG, it's now gone to the AG to implement this, where the Public Audit Act has been amended to give teeth to the AG to follow up on this. So now the accounting officer becomes responsible. If there's irregular expenditure, AG investigates that these process, that it hasn't been recovered, that proper investigations hasn't taken place. They can issue a death certificate to the accounting officer now. And it actually goes to the length where if the accounting officer leaves or wherever he moves in government, he still is responsible for that debt. So now it's gone from the organization to the AG to ensure that monies or public funds are protected. And I think if internal controls are properly implemented, consequence management is implemented within the organization, it shouldn't lead to that part where now the AG becomes responsible to recover the debts. Yes.
I think this would be my second last question before we are done for the day, just looking at the time. And this one I'm going to throw to the Mbda CEO, Ashraf.
Yep.
Hi, Ashraf. So Ashraf is a member of the board for the South African Cities Network. Ashraf, I just wanted to ask you, are these conversations being held at that level?
Yes and no. Yes, in that it is a big issue, and at the Cities Network, governance of the governance of municipalities is a big issue, and so it is something that's been continuously engaged with. And the Cities Network works with National Treasury, works with SALGA, the South African Local Government Association, and works with the Cooperative Governance Department as well. So there's continuous engagement on that in that respect. But when I say no, what I mean is that there can be a lot more impact in this. There is, when a lot of senior managers get together, they complain about the MFMA and PFMA, and they complain about compliance-driven, and these laws don't allow for delivery, and so on and so forth. And I think that's where the problem lies, in that somehow or the other, we feel that laws shouldn't be there because the impact on service delivery. And I think that's something that in the local government sector needs a lot more demystifying and a lot more engagement. I think analysts also miss that point, in that they don't see the relationship between the law and delivery and services delivery, because there is that connection. And the law does allow for, one, creativity, and two, for the delivering services within that creativity. And it even allows for the honest mistakes to be made. So in other words, if you went and did something and you worked within the prescripts of the law and something happened and money was lost, or the project didn't quite work out the way it did, the law respects that. The law understands that. And so I think people are using the law as an excuse not to do what they are expected to do. And that's one of the reasons why we are seeing service delivery hampered, because people are simply not spending the money because they don't want to engage in the process, because they feel the process might expose them. And I think that's where a mistake is being made, in that a lot more confidence building needs to be done amongst the officials to say the law is actually there to protect you, not to what you call the opposite of protect, expose you, or to send you to jail or anything like that. And I think that's where a lot of the discussion needs to be around confidence building. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashraf. So I would ask now for closing remarks from our panelists, and just hopefully touch on the fact that November 1st, South Africans are taking to the polls to vote for the local government, in the local government elections, for the municipal representatives. And then, do you think that these are conversations that voters should be having with their potential leaders? And as you close off, can you please just touch on that? Or if you don't want to veer into politics, just give us your closing remarks then.
Can I then start, seeing that my colleagues are also thinking about politics? I started off by saying that there's a legal framework. Everybody has to act in good faith, with integrity. They have to act in the best interest of the municipality. So as far as I'm concerned, if this a lot that is coming in now can act in that way, and if the voters can ensure that when they vote, that they are comfortable that this individual or this party that they cast their vote in favor of can actually deliver on something as basic as good governance, accountability, and transparency, then I think we will go a long way in improving the overall performance of municipalities. Thank you very much also for this opportunity.
Okay.
Collis, go ahead.
Thanks, Nomazima. For me, I think, again, as an opening remarks, I would like to emphasize that the same sentiments that says we need to get the job done within the ambits of the law. I think elections, I will just touch them on that general. Elections are coming, so officials, administrators should not be put on pressure in terms of using monies for other things instead of the intended purposes of providing services to the people on the ground. And then just to close it off, I would like also to say wrong is wrong even if everyone is doing it, and then right is right even no one is doing it. So law all the way for me. Thanks, Mazima.
Natasha?
I think just from my side, I think we all have